The leprechaun was never meant to bring cheer. He was a warning, a keeper of secrets, a reminder that greed always carries a price. We picture him easily. A small man dressed in green, buckled shoes, a hat tipped low, waiting at the end of a rainbow with a pot of gold. He is playful, comical, mischievous, sometimes holding a shamrock as if it were his emblem of luck. On postcards, advertisements, and holiday banners, he is always smiling, always harmless, a cartoonish guardian of Irish charm. But this image is new. It is an invention polished by centuries of retelling, sharpened by politics, softened by commerce, and exported as a symbol of Ireland itself. Beneath the friendly disguise hides an older story. A tale of a solitary fairy, a trickster, a keeper of treasure, who punished greed and mocked human weakness. A being whispered about in Ireland long before he was painted on mugs and printed on tourist shirts. The leprechaun we celebrate today is only a shadow of what once was. And to understand him, we must walk back through the centuries, peeling away each layer until the figure stands before us again, strange, secretive, and far more unsettling than the cheerful spirit of modern memory. Long before the leprechaun danced at the end of a rainbow, Ireland was a land alive with unseen presences, where the boundary between the mortal and the magical was thin, porous, almost breathless. Hills rolled like the backs of ancient beasts, forests whispered with wind through tall oaks and yews, and bogs clung to the earth like memory itself. In such a land, the human imagination did not invent the strange, it recorded it. And it is here, among the mists and the stone, that the story of the leprechaun begins. The Tuatha De Danann, people of the goddess Danu, were the architects of Ireland's earliest mythic landscape. They arrived as if carried on the wind, beings of power and knowledge, and were said to have come from the heavens themselves. Warriors, poets, healers, smiths, and builders, each excelled in a craft that transcended the ordinary. Their swords were said to sing in battle, their hammers to shape the very mountains, their music to stir hearts and bend wills. Every skill they possessed marked them as extraordinary, as creatures who moved in harmony with both the seen and unseen worlds. But time, like the slow erosion of limestone hills, did not stop for the Tuatha De Danann. They were eventually defeated by successive waves of mortal invaders, but unlike mere humans, they did not disappear. Instead, they receded into the earth, their golden halls and palaces swallowed beneath mounds and knolls, becoming the Aussie, the hidden people. These were neither gods nor men, but something in between, a lingering presence that whispered through the soil and the trees. Farmers knew them, respected them, leaving offerings of milk, bread, or coins at the bases of hills, careful not to disturb what lay beneath. The Fir Bolg, another thread in this tapestry, were a displaced people of small stature, said to have fled persecution from distant lands before arriving in Ireland. They ruled briefly, only to be conquered by the Tuatha De Danann. In memory and story, they persisted, small, clever, resilient. Some believe that from their fleeting presence arose the idea of the little folk, a race of beings simultaneously human and magical, real in the recollection of those who told their tales. The Fir Bolg were a reminder that even those diminished by circumstance could leave an enduring imprint on myth, that the small and hidden could survive in the shadows of memory. Throughout centuries, these myths did not exist in a vacuum. The people of Ireland spoke of gods and hidden folk as neighbors unseen. A Tuatha De Danann might inhabit the hill beyond a village, the same hill where children played or farmers sowed their crops. Stories of them were living history, whispered across hearths and markets, repeated by elders and wandering storytellers. Into the 17th century, the belief in such beings persisted with sincerity. These were not merely tales, they were the threads of reality itself, interwoven with human life. Within this landscape, craft and skill were sacred. To be a master of any trade, be it blacksmithing, weaving, stonework, or metalwork, was to command respect. Artisans shaped not only material goods but social standing, and the wealth produced by such labor was both prized and perilous. Hidden treasures, whether in chests or buried beneath the earth, were signs of both human cunning and divine favor. To create, to preserve, to guard was as much a moral responsibility as a practical necessity. Wealth could corrupt, but it could also empower. To mishandle it was to invite ruin. It is in this fertile soil of mythology, craft, and careful guardianship that the first whispers of the solitary fairy emerged. Unlike the grand assemblies of the Aussie, these beings were alone, small, and often hidden. They were neither rulers nor servants, neither mortal nor god. They were workers of the hand and the mind, masters of their own craft, bound to the earth in a way that humans might envy but rarely understand. They were watchful, clever, and quick, qualities that would one day define the leprechaun. These solitary fairies were linked intimately with the land itself. They were said to inhabit hollow trees, rocky outcrops, and quiet hillsides, often near the waters that nourished the soil and sustained human life. The forest floor, the bog, the stream, they were their workshops, their hiding places, their domain. To pass by without respect was unwise. Offerings were made not out of superstition alone, but from a deep, instinctual knowledge that survival in such a world required acknowledgement of forces beyond sight. The moral lessons embedded in this early Irish world were subtle yet pervasive. The Tuatha De Danann, though powerful, had fallen. The Fir Bolg, though clever, had been conquered. Skill and craft could elevate one, but only if paired with caution, respect, and cunning. Smallness was not weakness, and hiddenness was not absence. Every action had consequence. Every coin buried, every shoe stitched, every offering left at the base of a mound carried weight beyond its material value. The solitary fairy was the embodiment of these principles, a creature who could reward, punish, or deceive, according to the reckoning of the moment. It is here, among rolling hills and misted valleys, that the leprechaun's story begins, not as a cheerful sprite, not as a mascot for celebration, but as a creature born of craft, cunning, and the deep intertwining of human and magical worlds. From the retreat of gods into hidden mounds, from the fleeting memory of displaced peoples, and from the sacred respect for labor and treasure, the solitary fairy emerges, a small figure, old and wizened, bound to the earth, possessing wealth, knowledge, and a sharp mind. And though we will meet him later in green, with a pot of gold and a smile for the modern eye, here he is first something older, stranger, and far more potent. He is the echo of gods in the soil, the shadow of displaced peoples, and the embodiment of a culture that revered craft, protected treasure, and never forgot the consequences of greed. Out of this soil, the solitary fairy, neither god nor human, emerges fully, ready to step into the stories that would shape centuries. He is not yet the jolly figure at the edge of the rainbow, but the first flicker of the creature who will one day guard wealth, grant wishes, and test the cunning of those who dare to cross him. And it is from here, in this Ireland of mist, stone, and hidden folk, that the story of the leprechaun will begin to unfold. In the vast tapestry of Irish folklore, the leprechaun stands apart from the other fairy folk, defined first and foremost by his solitude. Unlike the trooping fairies, who gather in bands, dancing through glens and meadows, the leprechaun exists alone. He wanders the hills, forests, and hidden corners of Ireland, never forming social bonds with others of his kind. This solitude shapes his nature. He is self-reliant, watchful, and cunning, living according to his own rules, governed by craft and the protection of his treasures rather than by communal ties. Across Ireland, certain traits of the leprechaun remain remarkably consistent. He is always male. His body is small, ranging from a few inches to a couple of feet in height, yet the size never diminishes the force of his presence. Age and wisdom mark his figure. his face lined and sharp, his eyes gleaming with intelligence and caution. He is lean from a life of labor, and every movement reflects a mind accustomed to observation and calculation. These physical traits do not merely define his appearance. They signify a creature shaped by centuries of story, a being whose very form communicates both skill and authority. Even as his general traits remain constant, his attire varies significantly from region to region, reflecting the rich diversity of Ireland's folklore. In some areas, he is described wearing red coats and hats, adorned with silver or gold buckles on his shoes, and equipped with a magical hat that allows him to disappear at will or travel swiftly across the land. Other accounts present him in the elaborate dress of Elizabethan times, ruffs encircling his neck, lace frills at his wrists, an almost theatrical elegance in stark contrast to his diminutive size. On the western coasts, he shields himself from the damp chill of the Atlantic winds with a sturdy overcoat. Yet it is in Leinster that his attire takes the form most familiar to modern eyes: a green suit with a matching hat, a wide belt buckle, and polished boots. This regional variation, centuries later, would provide the template for the cheerful St. Patrick's Day image known worldwide today. The leprechaun's name is as varied as his appearance, echoing the nuances of language and local tradition. Gaelic speakers often use Leprechaun, while outside Ireland, Leprechaun has become the most common spelling. Scholars trace the name to Leithbrog, meaning one shoemaker, a direct acknowledgement of his craft. Across the country, local dialects produce other variations, yet they all point to the same essential identity: a solitary, skilled artisan, deeply connected to his work and to the hidden wealth it produces. Craftsmanship is at the heart of the leprechaun's existence. He is first and foremost a cobbler, his small apron, hammer, and leather scraps never idle. The rhythmic sound of hammer striking leather echoes through the quiet of his hidden workshop, whether it is tucked beneath a tree root, a hollow rock, or a secluded hillside. Some tales even describe him crafting shoes for other fairies, each pair imbued with exquisite skill and careful attention to detail. The leprechaun's labor is meticulous, demanding both patience and precision, reflecting a culture in which skill was revered and labor carried intrinsic moral value. Through his work, the leprechaun accumulates wealth, yet his riches are earned, not stolen. Gold coins and hidden treasures are the natural outcome of expert craft, symbols of his diligence rather than mere avarice. Yet this wealth is never left unprotected. Hidden beneath mounds, inside hills, or secreted in other obscure locations, it is fiercely guarded, both by cleverness and by his solitary vigilance. The leprechaun's wealth is intertwined with his labor. It is a physical manifestation of skill and careful stewardship of resources. While his work provides the means to accumulate wealth, it is his intelligence, vigilance, and shrewdness that ensure that wealth remains beyond the reach of intruders or careless humans. This careful balance of labor and cunning distinguishes him from other fairies and establishes a moral framework. Craft is valuable, labor earns reward, and cunning protects both. Even without resorting to overt trickery or mischief, the leprechaun demonstrates that intellect and skill can safeguard fortune in ways brute strength cannot. In this way, the solitary fairy emerges not merely as a whimsical figure of folklore, but as a reflection of Ireland itself. His independence mirrors the rugged, untamed landscapes he inhabits. His diligence mirrors the cultural reverence for craft and skill. His hidden wealth mirrors the subtle, often unseen treasures of human life, both material and moral. The leprechaun's existence is a study in balance. The small can hold power, solitude can breed authority, and labor, when combined with careful intelligence, produces reward beyond measure. Out of these hills and hidden mounds, the leprechaun's life unfolds in quiet labor, shaping his world, honing his craft, and guarding his treasures. Though he will later gain a reputation as a trickster and mischief maker, in this stage of his story he is defined by mastery and vigilance, by the discipline of work and the careful management of what he earns. It is a life that teaches lessons as enduring as the stone beneath his feet. Skill matters, vigilance is necessary, and every treasure, tangible or intangible, requires care, patience, and discretion. And so, from the misted hills, the hollow trees, and the hidden crevices of ancient Ireland, the solitary fairy stands fully formed. He is neither human nor god, neither ruler nor servant. He is an artisan, a guardian, and a creature of profound intelligence. In his solitude, he observes the world and shapes it in miniature, leaving subtle marks on the land and on the imagination of those who might glimpse him. The leprechaun is not yet the jolly green man, nor the symbol of luck and celebration. He is the first spark of a being whose story will stretch across centuries, from the shadows of Irish folklore into the light of popular imagination. The leprechaun's relationship with treasure is central to his identity. His wealth is not idle or casual. It is hidden, carefully stored, and fiercely guarded, scattered across Ireland in caves, dense woods, along riverbanks, and tucked beneath stones and hills. These hoards are the fruits of skill, labor, and vigilance. Each coin, each golden trinket, is both a reward for his craft and a test of human cunning. To touch the leprechaun's treasure without permission is to risk misfortune, for he is vigilant, clever, and unyielding when it comes to what he owns. Stories of humans attempting to seize his gold reveal the moral lessons embedded in folklore. In the tale known as The Little Shoe, a man discovers a leprechaun engaged in his work, hammering leather beneath a horse. The man seizes him with his hands, demanding the purse of gold. The leprechaun offers to provide it, but the human loosens his grip too soon, and the small cobbler escapes, laughing, leaving behind only a single tiny shoe. That shoe, delicate and perfectly formed, becomes a symbol of both the leprechaun's skill and the folly of human greed. In another account, Master and Man, recorded by Thomas Crofton Croker in 1825, a leprechaun grants a man a wish, but when the man insults or fails him, he enforces a punishment. The leprechaun declares that the man must serve him for 7 years and a day, binding the human to labor and obedience as compensation for his misjudgment. Tasks include acts that are magical, unusual, or morally testing, illustrating that encounters with the leprechaun are never simple transactions. Each story emphasizes the consequences of greed, arrogance, and thoughtlessness, reinforcing the leprechaun's role as a moral arbiter as well as a mischievous creature. The earliest written references also reveal this pattern of cunning and moral judgment. In the 7th or 8th century text, Ectra Fergus Mac Leti, a king falls asleep on the beach and awakens to find himself dragged into the ocean by 3 leprechauns. He manages to negotiate with them, securing 3 wishes in exchange for their release. Even at this early stage, the leprechaun demonstrates a consistent strategy. The human believes they are in control, yet the clever fairy ensures that any reward is earned through wit, patience, and respect. These stories reinforce a recurring theme across centuries. Humans are often blinded by greed, and the leprechaun remains always one step ahead. Other accounts emphasize the leprechaun's mischievous, sometimes violent tendencies. He is known to throw furniture in frustration, steal food from unsuspecting homes, and ride on the backs of sheep to traverse the land. These behaviors are not purely for entertainment. They serve as warnings and demonstrations of power. Even the smallest being, when clever and motivated, can disrupt human expectations and teach lessons that cannot be ignored. His mischief is never aimless. It is deliberate, testing the moral fiber of those who encounter him. In these stories, the leprechaun emerges as more than a trickster or hoarder. He is a moral judge, punishing greed, mocking arrogance, and enforcing the value of wit and observation. He operates in the shadows, a small but formidable force, ensuring that wealth, respect, and knowledge are never taken lightly. Humans who attempt to outwit him without humility, patience, or intelligence invariably fail, revealing the deep connection between morality and folklore in his tales. Over time, as Ireland's social and political landscape shifted, so too did the leprechaun's image. Centuries of conquest, famine, and emigration influenced how he was remembered and represented. He remained a guardian of treasure and a symbol of cunning, yet stories began to emphasize mischief and trickery more than skill and labor. By the 19th and 20th centuries, the leprechaun became not only a cautionary figure in folklore, but also a character in stories for wider audiences. A small man of gold and green, associated with luck and whimsy as much as with cleverness and moral judgment. Thus, the leprechaun's trickster traits and role as keeper of wealth are inseparable from his origins. He is the embodiment of the lessons of craft and vigilance, the consequences of greed, and the importance of intelligence and respect. He demonstrates that even the smallest figure, when armed with skill and careful judgment, can hold power far beyond physical size. In these stories, his character is fully formed, a solitary fairy who is both dangerous and instructive, a figure of humor and fear, treasure and trial. As centuries pass, the leprechaun's image continues to evolve with Ireland itself, shaped by hardship, cultural change, and emigration. From the hidden hills and mounds to the pages of folklore collections and popular tales, his story expands, always rooted in the duality of labor and cunning, skill and mischief, solitude and vigilance. His legacy is a reflection of the land, the culture, and the people who carried his stories through time, ensuring that the small, green figure of craft, gold, and guile would endure across generations. Beneath the cheerful stories and tales of hidden gold, the leprechaun has long carried a darker legacy. In the earliest folklore, he was not merely a craftsman or a clever trickster. He could blind, cripple, or enslave those who crossed him, punishing those who acted with greed, arrogance, or disrespect. These darker stories served as warnings, moral lessons woven into entertainment, ensuring that humans understood the consequences of underestimating a being both small and cunning. The leprechaun's hidden power was a reflection of the values of the culture that birthed him. Skill and craft could be rewarded, but folly and vice would not go unpunished. Regional variants reveal different aspects of this shadowed nature. The Leprechaun, sometimes described as a leprechaun on a drunken binge, was notorious for raiding cellars, stealing liquor, and disturbing human affairs with both humor and menace. His inebriation amplified the danger, making him unpredictable and sometimes cruel. The Fardarig, or Red Man, represents another facet of this darker character. He is a prankster, yet his tricks often carry a cruel streak, demonstrating that mischief can border on malevolence. These variants remind us that the leprechaun was never a single, uniform figure. He was a reflection of the land, the people, and the anxieties embedded in centuries of folklore. The rise of Christianity in Ireland influenced these tales, adding new layers of morality and fear. As pagan beliefs faded under the growing dominance of Christian thought, fairies, including leprechauns, were cast in a more sinister light. Stories began to depict them as potential punishers of human sin, capable of violent retaliation. Tales of changelings emerged, in which fairies replaced human children with their own, emphasizing the danger and unpredictability of these hidden beings. Leprechauns could also act as violent guardians of their treasures, ensuring that no human obtained gold without cunning or respect. This period marked the solidification of the leprechaun's dual role. He remained the magical shoemaker, skilled in craft and labor, but also a figure capable of malevolence when provoked or disrespected. Even as the leprechaun's darker traits were recorded, the moral framework of these stories remained consistent. The consequences he delivered were never arbitrary. They reinforced the importance of humility, patience, and cleverness, teaching that greed and recklessness would be met with swift and precise retribution. Humans attempting to outwit him without preparation or respect faced failure, injury, or servitude, and these tales became cautionary narratives embedded in the culture. The leprechaun's shadowed side existed to test human character as much as to frighten or entertain. This duality, magical artisan and violent trickster, makes the leprechaun unique among the fairy folk. While other fairies could be mischievous, he combined skill, craft, and cunning with an ever-present potential for harm. His small stature belied his power, and his solitary nature allowed him to observe, calculate, and act with precision. The same hands that crafted exquisite shoes could enforce punishment. The same clever mind that devised ruses to protect his treasure could teach painful lessons to those who attempted theft. This tension between creation and destruction, labor and mischief, defines the essence of the leprechaun's shadow. Even as his image evolved over centuries, the shadow remained beneath the surface. Stories that today seem whimsical or playful were once reminders of a more dangerous world, a world where unseen beings demanded respect, skill, and moral awareness. The cheerful green coat, the tiny shoes, the coins hidden at the end of a rainbow, all conceal the memory of the darker leprechaun, a figure whose origins are rooted in the fears and values of ancient Ireland. As Ireland's landscapes and societies shifted under the pressures of colonial rule, so too did the image of the leprechaun. Once dressed in the varied regional garments of red, brown, or even Elizabethan frills, the leprechaun gradually became associated with the color green. This was not merely an aesthetic choice. Green had long been a symbol of the Irish land, tied to its hills, fields, and misted valleys. And later it came to represent Irish identity and nationalism in ways both subtle and profound. The leprechaun, by adopting green as his signature attire, became a small but potent emblem of a people who clung to cultural memory despite external pressures. Fairy lore itself evolved under colonial rule. As English authorities sought to suppress the Irish language, customs, and traditions, many myths were forced into hiding or adapted to survive. Stories that once carried complex moral lessons, regional variations, and local significance were simplified or altered to suit new audiences. The solitary fairy, once a respected figure of craft and vigilance, began to shift in representation. His independence and intelligence remained, but his character increasingly took on traits that could be seen as humorous or harmless, reflecting a culture under external observation and influence. During the 18th and 19th centuries, the leprechaun's image was both preserved and reshaped through literature. Folklorists such as Thomas Crofton Croker compiled extensive collections of fairy tales, capturing the essence of Ireland's hidden people for future generations. Croker's stories recorded the leprechaun's skill, mischief, and moral lessons, yet they also introduced elements of caricature, often unintentionally exaggerating certain traits for dramatic or entertaining effect. William Butler Yeats, deeply invested in the preservation of Irish folklore, approached these stories with reverence, chronicling them with care while sometimes emphasizing their poetic and symbolic qualities. Both collectors ensured that the leprechaun endured in the cultural memory, but they also contributed to a gradual transformation, presenting him to a broader, often foreign, audience in forms that differed from the original oral traditions. In this period, the leprechaun became linked not only to moral lessons and craft, but also to identity and perception. Among the Irish, he was sometimes a symbol of cultural pride, a reminder of ingenuity, skill, and resilience. Among outsiders, however, he was often a figure of mockery, reduced to a small, whimsical man in green, obsessed with gold, luck, and trivial mischief. This duality reflected Ireland itself, a nation whose culture and people were both admired and derided, whose history of resistance and survival became inseparable from the stories that emerged from its lands. The leprechaun's changing appearance and perception illustrate a broader tension between preservation and adaptation. He retained the essential qualities, but over time, his visual identity became more standardized, his green suit and buckled shoes gradually eclipsing the regional variations that had characterized him for centuries. The magical hat, the apron, the small stature, all remained, but the color green became a unifying marker, linking him unmistakably to Ireland and signaling a new era in which folklore and national identity were intertwined. As Ireland's people emigrated, fleeing famine, oppression, or seeking opportunity abroad, the leprechaun traveled with them. He became a cultural ambassador in exile, carrying centuries of folklore across the Atlantic. On foreign soil, his story adapted once again. The mischievous, skilled, solitary fairy encountered new audiences unfamiliar with the subtlety of Irish myth. Simplified and commercialized representations took hold, emphasizing whimsy, luck, and the promise of gold over craftsmanship, caution, or moral cunning. Yet even in these new forms, traces of his original nature endured, a reminder of his origins among the hills, caves, and hidden workshops of Ireland. By the end of this period, the leprechaun had acquired multiple layers of meaning. He was at once a figure of folklore, a symbol of Irish identity, a product of literary preservation, and an object of caricature or amusement. His evolving appearance, from red to green, from regional attire to a standardized suit, mirrored the shifting cultural and political landscapes of Ireland. His stories continued to teach lessons, both serious and playful, and his character remained a testament to the resilience of myth in the face of change. Through these centuries, the leprechaun demonstrates the enduring power of folklore to adapt and survive. He carries within him the history of a people, the memory of labor and skill, and the lessons of morality and vigilance. Even as his image changes, his essence remains, bridging past and present, homeland and diaspora, tradition and transformation. And as he crossed the sea with the Irish diaspora, the leprechaun would begin to take on new roles, becoming at once a figure of nostalgia, an emblem of identity, and a subject for commercialization. In foreign lands, he would evolve further, yet every green coat, every buckled shoe, every small coin of gold would carry whispers of the hills and hidden workshops from which he first emerged. As the 19th century unfolded, Ireland's landscape changed in ways that would carry its stories far beyond its green hills. The Great Famine of 1845 to 1852 forced countless Irish men and women to leave their homeland, seeking survival and opportunity across the seas. Cities in America, particularly New York, Boston, and Chicago, became destinations for these displaced communities. London, Liverpool, and other English cities also received an influx of Irish immigrants. Along with their homes, their traditions, their songs, and their memories, they carried the stories of their lands, the legends of fairies, the tales of gods long gone, and the tales of the solitary shoemaker, the leprechaun. In these new lands, the leprechaun took on a new role, both a symbol of identity and a figure subjected to the prejudices of outsiders. To the Irish, he represented connection, a link to the hills and hidden hollows left behind. He was a reminder of craft, cleverness, and survival, a reflection of the ingenuity that had sustained their people for generations. Among non-Irish observers, however, his image was increasingly tied to stereotypes of the immigrant population. Stories emphasized a leprechaun who was less industrious, more indulgent, a little man chasing gold, drinking, and seeking luck rather than labor. The clever cobbler of Ireland became a caricature, a happy-go-lucky trickster whose craft and moral lessons were overshadowed by humor, greed, and whimsy. The holiday of St. Patrick's Day played a pivotal role in the leprechaun's transformation abroad. Although the day itself had a long history in Ireland, celebrating the death of the saint and accompanying feasts, it was in the diaspora that the first formal parade took place. In 1772, on March 17th, homesick Irish soldiers serving British forces marched through New York City, honoring their patron saint with music, banners, and the spirit of their homeland. By the 19th century, as Irish communities grew, the parades became grand celebrations of culture, identity, and survival. In these public expressions of Irishness, the leprechaun appeared as a recognizable figure, a whimsical symbol of the homeland. Yet even in celebration, his character had softened, reflecting the distance from Ireland's hidden hills, from the shadows of his workshops, from the moral cunning of the solitary fairy. Commercialization accelerated this evolution. As the Irish diaspora settled into new countries, merchants and advertisers recognized the leprechaun's potential to attract attention and sell products. He appeared on postcards, toys, and advertisements, his small green figure promising luck, gold, and a touch of the exotic. The leprechaun became a familiar emblem not only for Irish communities but also for a wider public eager to consume symbols of folklore and identity. In the 20th century, this trend intensified. He became a serial mascot, a cartoon face, a fixture of children's entertainment. Each iteration emphasized cheerfulness, playfulness, and approachability, a stark contrast to the solitary artisan of Ireland. His craft and moral authority faded into the background, replaced by the promise of whimsy, luck, and commercial appeal. Even as he became a cultural export, traces of the original leprechaun persisted, often unnoticed beneath the cheerful surface. The small green man with the buckled shoes and the jaunty hat still represented craft and hidden wealth, if only metaphorically. Every coin, every prank, every tiny shoe hinted at the labor and intelligence that had defined him in his homeland. For the Irish abroad, he was a comforting figure, a reminder of roots and continuity, a connection to the hills and hidden hollows that remained far across the Atlantic. Government and commercial initiatives further reinforced this transformation. In the late 20th century, Enterprise Ireland, the government entity promoting Irish goods and culture, alongside Irish-American retailers, highlighted the leprechaun as a cultural symbol. Products, marketing campaigns, and cultural events leveraged his image, cementing him as a recognizable figure of Ireland in popular consciousness. At the same time, growing interest among Irish Americans in genealogical research, ancestry, and cultural heritage encouraged a renewed fascination with traditional folklore, albeit filtered through the lens of diaspora experience. DNA testing, family trees, and historical research allowed descendants to connect with Ireland, often encountering the leprechaun as an entry point into a rich, complex heritage. Through this process, the leprechaun's character became dual in nature. On one level, he is a cheerful figure, a mascot of celebration and luck, approachable to children and adults alike. On another level, he carries echoes of the old Ireland, a solitary craftsman, protector of wealth, a moral judge of human greed and folly. Though the green suit and pot of gold have replaced the red coats and Elizabethan frills, and though public perception emphasizes humor over vigilance, the shadow of the original leprechaun endures. Each depiction, from parade floats to cereal boxes, is a pale reflection of the hammering sound that once echoed through hidden workshops. Each laugh or prank a faint echo of the cunning that shaped him in Ireland's hills and hollows. The diaspora also reshaped the stories themselves. Legends once recounted orally, with regional detail and moral complexity, became simplified, condensed, and tailored for new audiences. Tales were told in classrooms, printed in newspapers, or adapted for entertainment, often stripping away the darker or more nuanced traits. The leprechaun as punisher, as moral arbiter, as solitary master of craft, gave way to the leprechaun as entertainer, as emblem of luck, as cheerful representation of Irish heritage. Yet the persistence of certain motifs, the gold, the hat, the shoes, maintained continuity, a bridge between past and present, homeland and abroad. By the 20th century, the leprechaun had become a fixture of American popular culture. Cartoon faces, comic strips, cereal mascots, toys, and advertising campaigns portrayed him consistently as a small, green, joyful figure, chasing or guarding gold but never threatening in a moral or violent sense. These representations became ubiquitous, particularly around St. Patrick's Day, solidifying the leprechaun's role as a symbol of Irishness accessible to a global audience. Even as commercial pressures shaped the image, the leprechaun retained enough of his original identity to be recognizable, preserving the memory of craft and hidden wealth in the imagination of those who encountered him. Despite this cheerful exterior, the memory of the original leprechaun lingers. The solitary artisan, the moral trickster, the vigilant guardian of gold, is still present in folklore, often remembered by those who study Irish tradition, who recount old tales to children, or who explore the history of the diaspora. Each green suit, each buckle, each coin carries a trace of that ancient, cunning figure. He remains a bridge between cultures, a reminder that folklore can adapt and survive, that identity can be preserved even when transformed, and that beneath the commercial, cheerful mask lies a small, watchful figure whose hammer echoes faintly in the hills of Ireland. Today, the leprechaun exists in multiple forms, spanning folklore, literature, celebration, and commerce. For children, he is a playful figure waiting at the end of a rainbow. For adults, he is a symbol of heritage, identity, and continuity. For scholars and enthusiasts, he remains a study in morality and the survival of myth. Across all these forms, one constant endures. He is clever, vigilant, and rooted in the lessons of centuries. His stories remind us that intelligence, skill, and respect are timeless virtues, that folklore preserves moral truths, and that even the smallest figure can leave an enormous imprint on the imagination. In the end, the leprechaun is more than a character, more than a symbol, and more than a story. He is a mirror of Ireland itself, resourceful, resilient, multifaceted, and enduring. Beneath the laughter and the green attire, beneath the parades and the commercial images, he remains the solitary fairy, the skilled craftsman, and the cunning guardian who first emerged from the hills and hidden mounds. His tale is a testament to the survival of culture and folklore, and the way stories, like gold, can be treasured, preserved, and carried forward across generations and continents. And so, when you see a small figure in green, a pot of gold, or a buckled shoe, remember that behind every cheerful smile lies a history of craft and moral rigor. The leprechaun endures, quietly, patiently, and always watchful. A guardian of treasures both real and imagined, a bridge between past and present, and a living echo of the hidden magic of Ireland.